Komodo dragon attacks on humans are rare. Between 1974 and 2012, there were 24 reported attacks on humans, of which 5 of them were fatal. How big are Komodo dragons? Adult Komodo dragons are among the largest and heaviest lizards on Earth. In the wild, they can weigh around 154 pounds, 70 kilograms. But the largest confirmed dragon weighed in at 366 pounds, 166 kilograms. It also measured at a length of 10.3 feet, 3.13 meters. Komodo dragons have an expanding stomach, and this enables them to eat up to 80% of their own body weight in a single meal. In the wild, Komodo dragons live in the Indonesian islands of Komodo, Rinca, Flores, Gili Motang and Padar. The largest island is Komodo. There are just over 4,000 of these animals left in the wild. They mainly eat goats, pigs, rodents and deer, and other small mammals. A Komodo dragon attacks and bites a boy in half. In 2007, a dragon killed an 8-year-old boy on Komodo Island, making it the first fatal attack on a person in 33 years. Komodo dragons are the world's largest lizards and are only found in the wild in Indonesia. The attack happened on Komodo Island, where there are only a few thousand people living in villages. The child lived in a small village on the island, and he and his friends were playing around the scrubland. They were not aware that the huge dragon lizard was watching and stalking them. The child moved away from the group to go to the toilet. This is when the dragon pounced from behind the bush. It grabbed hold of the boy with its huge mouth. It bit into the middle of his body, shaking him from side to side. The other boys were terrified by what they were seeing. They ran to the village to get help. A fisherman was nearby and heard the screams of the boys. So he ran towards the Komodo dragon, who still had the boy in its mouth. He threw rocks at the animal until it released the child, and then it ran off. Nothing could be done to save the boy because he was bitten in half. He died within half an hour from massive blood loss. He was picking apples from the tree. In 2009, 31-year-old Muhammad Anwar, a fisherman, was on Komodo Island. He was at an orchard there and was in a tree collecting some apples. He did not realize that 2 Komodo dragons were under the tree. They had spotted him earlier and were waiting their chance to attack him. It came when Muhammad slipped and fell to the ground. He did not stand a chance, as the 2 animals began to bite him. People had heard his screams, but they were too late. He had suffered fatal injuries and was bleeding from bites to his hands, body, legs and neck. They brought him to a clinic on Flores Island, but Anwar died shortly afterwards. He was on holiday on a bird-watching trip. In 1974, Reading von Bieberich, a 78-year-old baron from Switzerland, was on a walking trip with other tourists. They were bird-watching on the island of Komodo. He was finding that the walk was getting too much for him. He decided to stop and rest while the others continued up the hill. When they came back, he was nowhere to be found. Eventually, his camera case and one of his shoes were found. It is assumed that he had been eaten by a Komodo dragon. A memorial cross was placed near where he disappeared. The cross is engraved with, "He loved nature throughout his life." These divers thought they were safe when they were washed up on an island. A group of divers could not return to their boat. They had been swept by the strong currents away from it. They had drifted for about 25 miles. It was an estimated 10 hours before they came across a small island. They were finally able to come ashore onto the island at midnight. They were relieved to get out of the water and to safety. But their horror was only starting. They did not know that this was Rinca Island, where around 1,300 Komodo dragons live. As the tourists were coming in from the water and resting on the beach, they were attacked by the animals. A Swedish woman, Helena Nevelinen, 38, was the first to be attacked by a dragon. She screamed and used her diving belt to hit the animal. As the dragon was tugging at this belt, others tried to get it away from her. They managed this by throwing rocks and hitting its head. Charlotte Allen, 24, and her boyfriend James Manning worked as diving instructors in Thailand for the previous 3 years. They were on holiday in Indonesia and were part of the group of stranded divers. This horror was to continue for 2 days and 2 nights. More dragons came and continued to attack them. They had to eat raw shellfish that they had scraped from the rocks. They had orange emergency floats spread out on the rocks. Finally, an Indonesian rescue crew spotted them, and their nightmare stopped. They needed time to recover in the local hospital on Flores Island, but they were all unhurt. A worker is attacked as he sits at his desk. In 2009, Mr. Maine headed to the staff office as he would any other morning. Like all the other buildings on Rinka Island, Maine's unit sat on stilts. Hungry dragons would often gather below to wait for the occasional food scrap. On this morning, however, Maine sensed that he was not alone. Just settling in at his desk, he looked down. At his dangling feet lay a dragon, peering back up at him. Maine attempted to slowly withdraw his leg from the dragon's head and mouth. But he moved too quickly and alerted the animal. The dragon bit down on Maine's leg, clenching its jaw shut. Maine kicked at the dragon's neck and then grabbed its jaws with his hands. He was able to open the dragon's mouth, but as he did so he had his arm ripped open. Although Maine shouted for help, most of the rangers were in the cafeteria and could not hear his screams. Only one person picked up on the noise and came to investigate. When he saw what was happening, he alerted the other men. By this time, the smell of blood was everywhere. This was attracting even more dragons towards the ranger. Some of the men fended off the other approaching animals, while two of them ran into Maine's office to help him fight off his attacker. They got hold of the injured Mr. Maine and brought him out of the office. The other men kept the pack of dragons waiting outside away from them. He was carried to the island's dock, where he was rushed to Flores Island's hospital. The injuries were too much for the small medical center to fix, however. So he was flown to Bali for 6 hours of emergency treatment. He had to have 55 stitches. After 6 months, Maine was able to go back to work. More interesting facts about Komodo dragons. They can run at speeds up to 12 miles per hour, 20 kilometers, for short distances. Komodo dragons can lay a clutch of 15 to 30 eggs. The eggs incubate for around 7 to 8 months. Once the eggs hatch, the babies have to make a run for it. Komodo dragons are cannibalistic. They eat younger dragons and will even eat their own offspring if hungry. As soon as the babies emerge from their eggs, they enter a world filled with danger. To avoid being eaten by other larger dragons, the hatchlings must get to safety in trees. They are born with the skills to climb and run fast. So the younger ones spend their first 5 years living in trees, where larger Komodo dragons cannot reach them. Once they hit this age, they are usually large enough to fend for themselves. So they come down and live with the rest of the adults on the ground. Baby dragons are called hatchlings. The scientific name for Komodo dragons is Varanus komodensis. For more facts about animals, click on the subscribe button.